All right. It's October 27th, 2022. George and Peter and I are having some pre-recording discussion, which we can look over. And we're having an education meeting. So we initially just had some only textually recorded discussions on anything related to education. And now we're going to turn to the normal agenda. Second item, review of this table. So for these items or for any other item that people want to suggest, like potentially what you just mentioned, George, about the kind of process of weekly meetings and so on, we can just talk about any one of these that have updates. So one update, Len Troncalli provided me with 2 YouTube video links, and I gave some overviews and notes on those videos. There was a lot to learn. And I'm sure people who have seen it and other works will have a lot to add, but maybe just to kind of skip to the end, even though of course the whole thing is where the whole thing is. There was the where things have worked and where things have not worked in terms of stealth system science. And then here was a recommendations slide. Don't change administrators. No administrator is high enough. Be awarded lots of external funding. Plan early for legacy and turnover. Must encourage or enable jobs and job categories for system scientists. Must accumulate many exemplars of successful systems applications. Go beyond belief systems. Do not discount what we are up against.
Yeah, that latter I agree with.
Yeah.
So
that was very interesting. And
I think, one of the other things that, I was in that's related to this and to Len Troncalli's and that slide you just showed was I was recently in Corvallis at Oregon State University. No, not at Oregon, Portland State University, I beg your pardon. And
well, that's in Portland. That's in Portland.
It's in Portland, Portland State University in Portland.
Yeah.
And I talked to Wayne, who is the chair of the system science program there. And he, if I haven't mentioned this before, he said he would work with me to create a page for ISSS on that program, because it's one of the few, if not the only, system science programs in the country. And they can take undergraduate students in one-off course attendance online now, because they have a lot online. But they have a bachelor's degree minor, I think, in system science. They have a master's degree program and a PhD program. So I think that ISSS should be supporting and helping those universities that actually offer system science courses, and that's one of them.
Nice.
So we haven't done that. I'll find it.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of Santa Fe Institute and Arizona State, and the way that non-university, like not degree directly conferring organizations can be helpful in the educational landscape. Like the capacity for mentorship may be much higher for a system scientist at the ISSS than even in any given undergraduate or grad school program. Because those are sometimes like skills and ways where even if you're getting what you're getting in academia, it still is good to have somebody outside too. So yeah, I just wondered, like, okay, well, Len, if you listen to the recording, or if anyone else, just
Let us know.
yeah, well, one part, okay, just kind of looking at a few other parts that are relevant here. There is many books shown on these reports. And so it's sort of like, why have people not taken into account that there was like all of these, like there's a strong forgetting with systems education, but there's also a movement for integrated education with systems science. Four revolutions needed: significant integration of content, integration of new teaching and learning methods, unique new assessment tools, and experiment in roles. So there's many other interesting images here.
What was that last one about roles?
Real life production, problem solving, entrepreneurial stimulus, and mentorship.
Okay.
Role-based participatory systems is really important. So I think that's just very advanced and ISGE. Well, to return to our main table, but I'm going to leave it up. Anybody who wants to discuss this or that, then let's add the university discussions. I mean, I'll just add both of you just because we talked about it here. Okay. Okay, let's return to what we were talking about a little bit before with the current ISSS knowledge resources. So we'll be talking more about this in knowledge engineering next week, I guess, Peter. But I think today, just from an educational side, like,
Yeah,
it's
next
more
week
about,
maybe next week may be difficult for me. I'm going to be busy on Thursday, so I can't make next week.
okay, all good.
Sorry.
In the coming future time.
Weeks.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
next
if
week,
we,
I can't make.
but broadly, it's fair to say these are the kinds of resources that exist, and some of them can be publicized as is. Others can be developed either before public release or not, developed into some processed or augmented form. Yearbooks, bulletins, 1969 to 2013, journals.iss.org, annual meetings, session videos, 2018 to 2022, primer project, world of systems, systems maps, primer, double question mark, social media, journals, including Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, old website. SRBS is?
Yep.
What is SRBS?
Systems research and behavioral science.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Primer, conversations, foundation.
Where?
90s. Yeah. So I also had a conversation with Carrie and Mark
Yeah.
regarding FedWiki.
FedWiki. Yeah.
And I haven't had my account or whatever made yet, but it was interesting just to see a little bit of it. And yeah, I guess, how does that fit into education?
Well, I mean, it's fascinating how it fits in with education. I mean, I've been familiar with FedWiki since the beginning, really. And FedWiki does have potential. Now, when I became president, I started working with Mark on gathering resources in the brain. And we were looking at other kind of mind mapping software with a view that it was related to, it could be exported, a JSON file could be exported and imported into Neo4j as a graph database, which you could therefore put queries against to find things out on. And over the last 3 or 4 years, Mark has been working with Ward Cunningham and his crew. And Ward Cunningham came to the 2019 Corvallis meeting, and they had a meeting partly initiated, I think, by David Ng, another former president of ISSS, around FedWiki and its role in educating about system science. And there's no question that the FedWiki has potential, as it is an individual wiki. So any individual takes on their own responsibility to create pages and link them to other pages, and you can copy pages from other people and then enhance them. And so it has a lot of potential. And within each page, which is actually a slice, it's not a full page as we're viewing here, but it is possibly about a third or a quarter of a regular screen. So it's a kind of like a reporter's notebook, if you've ever seen those. They tend to be rather thin. With a view to sort of having a slice of information that can be linked. And the actual interface that's been developed is there's something they call the factory, and the factory has a number of, there you go, it has a number of widgets in it that you can essentially embed different things in it. And there is a way of creating graphs immediately from the pages using the Neo4j modeling app to produce graphs, which is really quite fascinating. And I haven't really dug into it enough because it's takes concentration and time. And Kerry and Mark have been great champions of this and have worked on it almost exclusively and nothing else. As they now have they have an offering that they're calling relocalizing creativity.net. And so I am working on that. I have my own domain, or site, peterT.relocalizingcreativity.net, and I'm working on how it might be used for systems literacy and ocean literacy. But it's worth taking some time to get to know and seeing how it does apply for education. Essentially, I'm not crystal clear on exactly the direction to take that or to how to suggest it, but it's certainly something to consider in the mix.
Yeah. Like,
so
I think what's making me think about now is broadly, we're still surveying the resources. We're still getting the table of like the exact URL and full text of just like, so we're still quite early in this. Then we'll be developing a few test instances on some more technical and more conceptual sides. So for example, on the more technical side, we have a media wiki and people can explore, and if anyone bites and so on. And we can also explore personally and or as a ISSS with a FedWiki instance or username. Right. Then on the more conceptual side, continue integrating continue giving time for feedback and presenting progress to people who have more conceptual input on the structure of education and use of different systems materials. But in knowledge engineering, we can focus on discovering and integrating the resources. And then in education, we can think more about what is like the user experience and the actual like semantic components and teleos of resource use. But we might want to archive like a huge amount.
Yeah, I need to go. Thank you,
All right.
Daniel. I'll pick up the recording. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Sorry.
Farewell.
See you, Peter.
Cheers. Bye.
All right. So we talked about the LEN videos. We talked about some knowledge resources, and we'll come back to it in the coming weeks, over the coming weeks in knowledge engineering. Mini symposium viewing. I haven't watched them all. Do you have anything to say about the Saturday series at all?
Well, going back to when I first got involved, Peter started them up, and it was all about the SIGs. So, when did he start that? Been like 4 or 5 years ago. So those are just sort of local information about various SIG chairs presented what they thought their SIG was doing. And then we transitioned, once we ran out of SIGs, we transitioned to having discussions and member presentations and so forth. And then I took over to coordinate those. We eventually moved into inviting outside speakers to come in and make presentations. So I think those would be the ones to take a good look at, because what I was trying to do is show the members. We tend to be an echo chamber. And I was trying to show the members that there are a lot of people out there doing really, really good systems work, or using systems, very good systems thinking to do their work. And so that was the point of inviting those people in. And then we did, we had what was called open mic, which was basically, we were just, I'd suggest a question to talk about, and people could weigh in on what they thought. And then at some point, I started inviting past presidents to come and essentially for the newer members to get to know some of the past presidents, some of the people who made the society what it is today. And those were pretty popular, pretty well. We didn't get all the past presidents, but we got a lot of them. So those might be good ones to do. So I would suggest the outside speakers, and then the past presidents, and then just sort of pick and choose the open mic sessions.
Nice, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Reviewing different works. Let's, while you're here, first talk about just what was it that you were mentioning earlier. You brought it up in the context of just like a webinar. What was this about?
Yeah, the idea was to take the first textbook that Mike Colton and I wrote and translate the chapters into presentations. And basically just try to get the contents out. It was initially intended to be a textbook, but Mike and I kind of realized somewhere along the line that the textbook format wasn't really that appropriate. We wanted people to focus on on the content. So we put what are called question boxes throughout the chapters. And this was to facilitate whoever was coordinating the course, a teacher, to be able to bring his questions out and look for discussion among students. And so there are no, for example, there are no pedagogical questions at the end of the chapter that and basically it's we now call it a guidebook. So it can be adopted as a textbook, but generally speaking, it would be in the context of a seminar as opposed to a regular lecture class.
Okay.
So, but the idea of the webinar was for originally, the idea was for something that we could actually charge a fee for. Members get in free, and then any outsiders that wanted to view it would pay a small joining fee.
Yeah. Thank you.
We
Bob?
wanted the the contents to be available generally, but at the same time we wanted to sort of reward the members for being members.
Yeah. I think this is a really fundamental trade-off. And with digital content, there's only even so much that can be done. Like if it's just the videos, somebody, etc., then they can be acquired. Then there's like fundamental issues of access versus exclusivity, and like synchronous and asynchronous, and how to provide like high quality, free resources, open resources, while also providing meaning and value and novelty for members and affiliates and so on, without just like merely using that in a kind of extractive way to like hashtag make content. Like, I don't think that we're always here to have recorded meetings, because those are not always, for some people, wanting to be publicly distributed or put behind a paywall. So being really clear and intentional with like how all of the economics and privacy line up with our previous resources that exist, and then in our like ongoing design. But and like this, but to this specifically, what would help you do it, or what do you think is needed here? Like, do you need what?
Well, basically where we left off, this has been a while back now. I was going to look into various webinar platforms and see how they're managed. But like I say, at some point I started outlining what I would extract from the book and put into slides, thinking of a PowerPoint slide deck. But at some point, I just realized I can't do this myself. It's going to take a small team, and somebody's going to have to finish that research on webinar platforms and how they operate. So, and now as time has progressed and my health issues are getting a little more challenging, it's not something that I would take on by myself. It would need, you know, like I say, a small team.
Then for format of the final delivered video, you imagine it would be your solo presentation, or what format and what number of hours?
Yeah, hadn't gotten that quite that far
Okay, okay.
in
I just
thinking
wanted
it
to fit
through.
it.
So these are all questions. I mean, if you felt that this would be a worthwhile thing to take on for educational purposes, maybe you could find a few people to meet and outside the context of this meeting or in the context of this meeting in the future, to discuss what would be a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of Bucky Fuller's famous Everything I Know pre-live stream, something like 57-hour delivery.
Yeah.
And how much, of course, everyone has to share. Sometimes preferable and accessible through recorded conversation alone. However, also in many situations requiring presentation and or preparation of materials to make because it's not just a podcast with people who have deep work.
Right.
So it can't just be like, tell me about what you did broadly.
Right. No,
So
I had envisioned it as a introduction to system science for those outside of the ISSS, and keeping it relatively lean as compared to the actual book itself.
One format I'm very familiar with and have templates in Coda for is a series of incremental, topically themed discussions where either the host prepares presentation or I prepare the presentation. But I'm familiar doing it, but I'm also familiar coordinating it. So it seems like we could create an overview and then distribute it to those who are interested in education. And as you see, the work can be in this Coda or in another document, another space, but it can be an educational project because it's also prototypical of other relevant knowledge transfer tasks. It depends, I think, the continuum that I see as just an organizer in this situation is the continuum from obviously somebody who says, I did it, or here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to hand you the video files, ranging to, well, we need to scan these 30 books and then, translate this document and then get this into from this format. Like, just how large and custom is the compromise? And so I think only the author / creator knows the state of all relevant work that is to be conveyed in this pedagogical material, what they perceive the audience to be, and some thoughts on, like, is this like 10 hours, 10 chapters, just 1 hour per chapter. Broadly, here's what this chapter is about. Here's some of the key figures. Or is it 3 hours per chapter, or is it an interactive multi-person experience? Some of those options, being aware of those. Is it about trying to have the person show all the figures, show all the formalisms, have their speech recorded? So only the person, what is the licensing status of every image in the book? Only you know it. But if you specify that and what you're like willing to do and not, like, I'm willing to do a synchronous meeting hour and 1 hour of asynchronous work, or fill in the blank with these skills. Specifically, what I will need would be like this and this for how I envision it. Bring that back to education. And then we're like, we have an educational collaboration that is very well prepared. And this is just like, this is an important opportunity, and we expect to do this. Who will join this? And then try to pursue with higher reliability, and then initially be using these kinds of projects to template the kinds of resources that we need to work on this way, and eventually have better approaches too. But I think already we can start, and also we can ask this set of people, any of whom may be listening to this recording, but any of these people who are like excited by that particular work or see its impact or have a specific skill to apply, because I feel that is sometimes what prevents people from joining, is because like we're not doing tasks here in the sync meeting.
Right.
We're just hanging out and having conversation and preparing for what we're going to do.
Well, getting back to the idea of having a team, one of the things I thought about was that if someone was going to commit, and I mean commit, one of the things that I've been very skitterish about is people saying they're going to do something and then it just, it doesn't get done. But if people are ready to commit, I get my own books at a steep discount. So I would buy a book for each person who wanted to participate, so that they could have their own textbook. Give them time to ruminate over what they think the contents ought to be.
Okay. I'm hearing it as a little more multi-stage, where it sounds like we want people to demonstrate that they're serious about the process, obviously, because we can't embark partly, etc. So it's really like a onboarding / commitment demonstrating / knowledge building for people who want to join. Because if you can't do this, it's going to be impossible to continue. So we can only proceed in the actual work of whatever of these materials only, obviously, for people who have at the very least read multiple books, because they have to have familiarity with material.
Right.
That can be specified too. Like the overall vision could just be outlaid, and then this will entail an X month period where we plan to do, like, for example, we could do 3 months and do 3 or 6 sessions or something. So it's only maximum would be 3 to 6 hours. They have the PDFs. Maybe because it's free, or I don't know. Or maybe they have the books. those can still be
Yeah.
recorded in useful conversations, but that's sort of like, we're not really starting the work of like pedagogy. We're just sort of like making sure that people have read and understood the material. See who joins all the times that they said they would join, and or demonstrates at least coarse-grained understanding of the structure of different major works. And then those people who it will be obvious whom they are can proceed in this task. It's a very challenging trade-off. It's an important one. And for projects like this, it's required. And it's the great filter for just volunteer projects. But again, it's really important. And it's like hard to know where to set different stages of onboarding because not everyone even has quote time. And it's a small subset of people who will volunteer on these relatively large but extremely important topics. Someone like an undergrad or a master's student or a PhD student would benefit greatly from doing something like this at the scale of like an undergrad project or like chapter of a dissertation. I think that approximates how much work I would imagine is reasonable for somebody to put in. And I think that's a structure that actually somebody could do that. Like if there was a professor who was collaborating with you who had a PhD student, I'm just imagining that. Like that's a kind of low funding, potentially accessible way, because otherwise there's no other way to lay it out, yet this is the hardest part. And so I think it's important that if we want to have people who can allocate serious time to systems research, that like people in different stages can like have the space made for them to contribute on projects like this. Because again, I think it's like important in particular and as an example of this kind of work. Well, you can change it or add any more information or specify anything you want, and maybe we can discuss in a future time. Okay.
Okay.
I haven't too much read these specific works, just focusing on some other parts, but it will be up here to review and kind of annotate just like the previous videos, similar for what Gary Smith has shared. We talked about university kind of case studies, relationships with ISSS. FedWiki, how does it fit in with education? Okay, that is basically what we had to discuss today. That's all good for me. Anything else, George?
No, can't think of anything.
All right.
Right offhand.
Well, we'll continue these meetings. If someone's listening to the video, they can come to the meetings or have access to the document and to start to work or just learn. So I'll stop the recording.